body positivity. Oops, come on. Right. So basic overview of how this is going to go. So I want to first think about body image and what it is. Think about how we are. I kind of called it on public display, this idea of us and our embodied self in relation to other people. So there's a section on that. There's a section on body positivity, so how to do body positivity, some ideas around that. For some people, though, it's really challenging and you may well need some additional support. So there's a section on where you could find additional support, some sources of self-help, but also various charities and other organisations that potentially could help. And then hopefully, if I don't get carried away, there will be some time for some question and answers. So this first part is about body image. Now, back in it was 2017, I did a webinar about obesity. And as far as I understand it, that webinar is still recorded and it was recorded and it's still available to watch. So this is new material. There is a little bit of overlap, but not a lot. So if you saw that one, this is markedly different. So we start by thinking about body image. So body image, as it says on there. So that Sarah Grogan is a researcher who researches body issues. And she says it's the mental picture that people have of their physical self. And equally important, it's the mental picture that they believe other people have of them. And it's about how you perceive and your attitudes towards your embodied self. So, and it's not just your appearance. Your appearance is part of it, but it's also about how attractive you feel, the state of your health, how functional you feel. So the kinds of things that you can do, and also how confident or not you feel about your sexuality. So actually, it's not just getting your clothes off on the beach. It's more than that. There's quite a lot more to it. So as Lottie was saying, I have been hanging around the Pituitary Foundation for a very long time, like over 20 years. And I was thinking about all the conversations that I've had with people in that time. And you can't do justice to all of the conversations that I've had with people over like 20 years. But these are paraphrasing of things that people have told me about those key things that Grogan says are important in relation to body. So on the left in that first column, we've got the ones I just name checked: appearance, attractiveness, etc. So perception, the kind of things that people say about how it is for them. So their appearance is changed from how it was. And then the attitude that people have towards themselves. So quite often the change is not perceived positively. And people quite often say they really don't like themselves, all the way up to people actually hating themselves and hurting themselves, doing self-harm, because they are so disturbed about how things have changed. In relation to attractiveness, the idea that people don't look how they want to, or how they feel they should. And that can lead to an attitude of kind of, why bother? It's like, if I can't be how I want to be and I can't get back to how I was, then why bother? Why put any effort in? Why invest in myself? In terms of state of health, again, that sense of actually, you might have had surgery and you might be having hormone replacement, but it can take a long time for that to stabilize. And for some people, it seems like it takes an awful lot longer than for others. And that sense of, actually, with my pituitary condition, I really don't feel like I did before. And that attitude of, well, I can't trust my body because it keeps doing stuff. And it's all very well the doctor's giving me hormone replacement, saying my blood results are within the normal range, but actually it doesn't feel like that. And I don't know what's happening, and I don't know what to trust, who to trust, my body, the doctors. It's all very difficult. Functionality, the fatigue and illness, meaning that you can't do the things that you want to do, or doing the same things that you did before in the same way. And the attitude that might go with that is the fact that people try really, really hard, and they really do. but it doesn't feel like it's working. It's kind of like you're climbing up a hill and the hill's made of sand and you're going backwards half, no matter how hard you try, you're just going backwards. You're not actually seeming to make any progress. And in relation to intimacy or sexuality, your libido can go west with some of the pituitary conditions. And it's very difficult to feel sexy if you're tired, you're not feeling well, you don't feel attractive, your appearance has changed, and it can leave you feeling too afraid to be intimate. And that sense of, actually, why would anyone want to be? If this is how I am, why would anyone want to be around me or be like this? I think the saddest thing I heard someone say once was that they felt broken, and that they would totally understand if their husband left them, which is very, very sad, that their condition had kind of brought them to that point. So it's not an easy condition to live with. None of the pituitary conditions are easy to live with. That isn't the only element of them. So it's not just those 5 things that are related to body image. Psychosocially, the pituitary conditions impact much wider than that. So you've got the illness in the middle of this is the cognitive behavioral therapy hot cross bun, for any of you who want to kind of name check it and look it up again afterwards if you want to. Pituitary conditions can change how you feel. So some people get mood swings with them, for example. It changes the physiology. So you have to have hormone replacement and such. And it changes how you feel and what you do. So for some people, it might kind of say that if you're having difficulties with your appearance, then you can act as if you don't. And quite often, well, we have people who don't have underlying health conditions. That is the kind of advice that we would give them. We kind of unpick situations and say, okay, you could try this, and kind of act as if. And in essence, what you're helping them to do is to project parts of the other parts of their personality that they feel confident with. The problem with pituitary conditions, though, is that they can be quite pervasive. So some people will say, and do say, that the condition they feel like it's changed their personality, and so they can't rely on that anymore because they're not totally sure who they are anymore, and they've got mood swings. And then this whole idea of meeting other people when you've got memory and cognitive problems, and that kind of undermines how you feel as a person, that sense of competence that you have as an individual, just able to have and hold a conversation. And so you can end up that box on the right hand side, that there's an awful lot of guilt and shame and really difficult feelings, feeling worthless, ugly, stupid, that goes along with this. It's not, it can be very challenging for some people. So yeah, that's not to depress people. It's just to acknowledge that I do know how challenging this can be from kind of conversations I've had over the last few years. So in relation to having your condition and in relation to kind of relationships, if you like, Kent, who is another researcher, he researches appearance issues, talks about how individuals live our lives on public display, and where the existence of a visible difference is associated with unwanted exposure, and potentially resulting in unwanted responses from others. And certainly some individuals with pituitary conditions do say that when they're in public spaces, some of the comments they get from other people are hurtful and crass and unkind, and other people don't understand what it's like to live with. So here we have you with the pituitary condition in the middle, and this kind of constellation of individuals that you might come across in your life with your pituitary condition. I think part of the problem we have is that endocrine specialists, so the healthcare professionals, are quite often focused on the medical management of the condition. So it's a lot of blood tests and such, and they may not ask you about the wider implications of your pituitary condition. Family and friends might actually be focused on being grateful that you're still alive, and they also don't understand why you're not happy about what you're experiencing. other healthcare professionals and the wider general population, so colleagues at work, strangers, may not have even heard of pituitary conditions, and so they may not understand even remotely. So pituitary conditions, while in theory they come under the banner of cancer and oncology, they're like the poor cousin. They don't actually, that if you said to someone I have cancer, they would have a reasonable idea about what you're talking about. Say you've got a pituitary condition and they're totally clueless. They have no idea what that means. And all of that can leave you feeling very, very isolated, and not sure whether you're allowed to kind of talk about the difficulties that you might be having, or not, or having some very crass things said to you that are unkind and thoughtless. And even some healthcare professionals occasionally can do that and kind of make it sound like if you've got weight gain, it's your own fault because you're not managing your appetite properly. And I have heard some healthcare professionals say that in their considered opinion, there is no treatment that can be given to a human being that means that they gain weight. I kind of think of all the people I know who've taken steroids and think, I really wish you wouldn't say that, because it is so hard for people. And some treatments do cause weight gain, and some health conditions do. And saying that it's not doesn't help with the blaming and the shaming that goes on, which is unfortunate, to say the least. So, on top of all of that, I've called this under pressure because pituitary or individuals with pituitary conditions can feel under pressure. Our societal norms currently are for effortlessly thin and groomed women. You're supposed to look like you're on it without actually like having to put any effort in. It is supposed to be like, I naturally look this good. Yeah. If you're male, you're supposed to be ripped, as in have a very heavily muscled physique, and you're also supposed to be groomed. The difference between men and women is that men are allowed to talk about how difficult it is to spend time down the gym and sweating over getting the six-pack or whatever it is that they're trying to do. Women aren't supposed to talk about that at all. And we also have an increasingly troubling discourse within our society, is that you're supposed to work and contribute no matter your state of health. So recently we have had the Princess of Wales in hospital having abdominal surgery, and there were reports coming out of the hospital that she was really keen to carry on working even though she just had major abdominal surgery. It's kind of like, where does this come from? That you don't, all you do by putting yourself under that extra stress is make it the time to recovery that much longer. It doesn't actually help in any way, shape or form. But in society, that this is what we're moving towards, this idea that you're to blame somehow. So there can be this pressure that you're supposed to do all of these things. And so there's the blame and the shame that comes from these deviations from these desired norms. And blame and shame for using services and needing financial support. So increasingly, there's this discourse around the government wanting to cut financial support. What I would say is no one is to blame for having a pituitary condition. There isn't anything you can do that causes it to happen. You're not to blame if you're finding it difficult, because it is really, really hard. And I sometimes think that some of the people who are most critical and are very keen on wagging the finger and being judgmental, how would they cope with this? And I suspect the answer is not well, because it is difficult, it is challenging. The next slide is called the paradox of the norms. And I've called it that because back in Dickens's time, we had a really wide range of body types. Individuals were affected by poverty and illness. An awful lot of the illnesses that cause significant deviations from a kind of, 2 arms, 2 legs, that kind of, I want to say normal, but psychologists don't like the word of normal. It doesn't really convey anything useful. But a lot of the illnesses like smallpox and such that cause real significant deviations from a norm have been, we don't have them so much anymore. The smallpox has been eradicated. So, but back in Dickens's time, they were used to the idea that lots of people looked different. In our time, we're much more homogenous in terms of appearance, or at least that's what you could be led to believe if you look at social media. In actual fact, 26% of adults in England are obese. And 50% of our population have got a long-standing health condition. So the changes that are caused by pituitary conditions, so quite often it's weight gain and such, yes, they take people away from the desired norms of being effortlessly thin and ripped and groomed if you're male. But actually, they're not taking you away from the actual population norms of a quarter of our population being obese and half having a long-standing health condition. You're actually more towards the norm. So it's a bit weird, really. You're being put under pressure to do something that a significant percentage of our population already can't do. So it's a bit, why we kind of get on at patients about it, I do not know. I don't find it helpful at all. So healthcare professionals, interestingly, when we do training for healthcare professionals, it rapidly becomes apparent that they are actually aware of appearance-related distress in patients. And actually, they're also aware of the wider psychosocial impacts that pituitary conditions have. The problem is that quite often they don't believe that just talking and listening has any kind of therapeutic value, which it does. That there is research that says that it does, but they don't believe that. And also, they don't feel like they have the skills to be able to address the issue. So the big concern and the big barrier is they don't want to talk about something and make it worse. The other issue, and I think it's one that healthcare professionals who aren't psychologists find it really confusing, is that the degree of objective severity doesn't relate to the amount of psychosocial distress that someone might experience. So, for example, you can have someone who goes from a size 10 to a size 12 because of their pituitary condition. And some of you will be thinking, if only. They went from a size 10 to a size 12. And the amount of psychosocial distress they experience because of that could be really, really significant. But you have someone else who goes from a size 14 up to a size 20, and they're not experiencing it in the same way. So you can't actually guess by looking at someone and looking at the kind of change that they've objectively experienced, what that means for them and how they're interpreting that and how they're living with it. The other issue that we have is that some individuals who experience appearance-related distress can be very reticent to discuss it because there's this perception that it's not a usual part of clinical care, or that it's not important. We have this idea that if you're overly interested in your appearance, then that makes you vain, and that's not something to be encouraged. So it ends up not being talked about. And that's also true for some of the wider impacts of pituitary conditions as well, particularly conversations with healthcare professionals. So there's a lot of text on this slide. Basically, what this is trying to say is that pituitary conditions are really challenging and difficult, or they can be. There are some individuals for who it's very straightforward. As a psychologist, I don't actually meet many of those. So the quality of life for people with pituitary conditions is likely to be impacted by the condition. And quality of life comprises things like your satisfaction with how you feel and what you can do and the extent to which you can maintain relationships, social and intimate. And all of those things are linked. You can't look at one in isolation, they're kind of nested together. Part of the problem that people with pituitary conditions can have, and this is true of other long-term conditions as well, it's not just pituitary conditions, they can be thought of as having a component that's like a hidden disability. So things like their fatigue and the cognitive problems, you can't tell by looking at someone whether or not they're going to have that or not. And the fluctuating nature of some conditions. So some days you're able to do things and other days you can't. And that can make things worse for people and can make it really confusing to explain to other people. what's happening and why it's happening. In our society, we have this idea of being acutely ill. So we understand people having colds and broken arms and things like that. We don't have a good understanding, a description of what it means to live with a chronic health condition, particularly one that's prone to kind of flare-ups, or where your what you can do each day fluctuates and differs. And so, yes, we do need to do more to support the psychosocial needs of pituitary patients, because it is so challenging. All of which is to say that, yeah, it isn't straightforward, and it isn't easy, for all kinds of reasons, and it's not just the body image component. So back to the body image component. So body positivity. So what is body positivity? We kind of use it as a bit of a catchphrase. So it's a social movement. As I understand it, it started probably just over a decade ago. And there are different versions of body positivity. So there is one that is exclusively focused on obesity, and reducing the amount of fat shaming and also skinny shaming that goes on in society. But then there's another version that is much broader, which actually looks at promoting a positive view of all bodies, regardless of size, shape, skin tone, gender, and physical ability, and links as well to issues around disability. So yeah, it depends on what you're looking at as to which definition you will see. I'm using the broadest definition, because pituitary conditions are no respecter of skin tone, gender. It makes no odds. So this could look a bit scary. This is thinking about what can you do. So given all of the things I said about how difficult it is, what kinds of things can you think about? How can you do? So remember that I started out and there was that slide and it said perceptions and attitudes. I quite often use this. It's called Johari's window, and lots of people think Johari sounds very exotic, which it does. Johari is actually Joe and Harry, two American psychologists, and they put their names together, which I think is kind of, it's kind of charming and a bit quaint. So this might look a bit confusing, but actually it's really straightforward. So here you have things that you know about yourself. So this is you, and things you know about yourself, and things you don't know about yourself. You have yet to discover them. And down here, you've got other people and what they know and don't know about you. Okay. So in here, number one, our lovely purple coloured box, we have our public face. So this is things that you know about yourself that other people also know about you. And that could be things like your height, for example, your skin tone, things that people would generally agree. And I think part of the problem with pituitary conditions is your public face, because some of the conditions can radically change how you look. What people are seeing is very different to how you were before. Your relationship with yourself, we jumped to box 3. This is things that you know about yourself that you hope other people don't know about you. So you might hope that other people don't know how much you're struggling, potentially. It can also be odd things that we do, like, it's not odd really. You might have a crush on someone, for instance. So there might be some famous person that you absolutely love them to bits. You think they're, for sake of argument, brilliant musician, and yeah, you have a bit of a crush on them, and you would kind of hope that other people don't know that. Although some people are out and proud about that, and that's fine too. So this is about your kind of private world, if you like. If we go over here, we've got things that you don't know about yourself necessarily, but that other people can see about you. Now that might come across to you as criticism. Now, hopefully it's worded in a way that's constructive, but some of the things that people say, and I have said several times, some of the things that people can say about us, and also in overheard remarks, can be crass and unkind. what's interesting about that is criticism and overheard remarks, things that are unkind. We tend to be all over it. So we let it into our private world, into box 3. And we don't really interrogate it. We agree with it, particularly if we are not in a good place ourselves. If our relationship with ourselves is really poor and we aren't happy in how we perceive ourselves, and our attitude towards how we are is like, why bother? Why would anyone? I hate myself. Why would anyone want to have a relationship with me? Then if someone says something to you that is critical or unkind, you are going to be all over it because it matters with how you're feeling. And the compliments that people give you, which as adults are kind of like rare as hen's teeth, we're very good at holding them up and interrogating them and not letting them into our private world. We will actually kind of question other people's judgment and kind of say, how could someone who is my friend and supposedly an intelligent and nice person say something that is just like, I don't recognize this, I don't believe this. So we're very, very good at avoiding compliments and really not good at holding up criticism and overheard remarks. And in an ideal world, you would reverse it round so that you would let the compliments in and you would hold up the criticism and the overheard remarks and interrogate it and kind of go, do I really believe this? Is this really true? Quick segue into box 4, because you might be thinking that's really weird. How can you have stuff that's not known to you or to anyone else? That's all the stuff you've not tried yet. So if you've, I don't know, never tried drinking a sundowner, neither you nor anyone else is going to know whether you like it or not, or the non-alcoholic equivalent, whatever that is. Anything that you've not tried before, neither you nor anyone else knows whether you're any good at it, whether you'll like it. So it's all of that, it's all your potential basically sits in that box. So the way I use this with people is to try and encourage them to think about how can they have a better relationship with themselves where they are less prone to taking on board and letting in criticism and unkindness without actually. So what I get people to do usually if they're working with me is we draw a little set of castle turrets around here and we draw in a gatehouse, and everything that comes in has actually got to come through the gatehouse. You can't just let stuff in. You're not allowed to just let people bomb you with bad stuff. You've actually got to kind of look at it and think about it and kind of think, actually, does this person know that I have a pituitary condition? Do they really understand what it's like for me to be living with this? And in here is where you have your relationship with yourself. And I sometimes refer to it as your kind of secret squirrel relationship, because you don't actually have to tell anyone else what your relationship with yourself is about. And it's about how do you then start to build that up? What kinds of things can you do to improve your relationship with yourself, and kind of how can you do that in here? And so there are various ways that you can improve your body positivity. Some of it is about taking the time to understand yourself and how you're feeling. And not judging yourself because you're having a bad day or it's difficult, because if you have a long-term health condition, it's inevitable. There are going to be some days that are particularly challenging. Embracing your flaws rather than trying to fix them. It can take a bit of a while to kind of get your head around how to do some of these things. Finding something that you can appreciate about your body. The fact that you're still here, even though it's difficult. The fact that you can still go outside and see the Northern Lights, which was really weird, actually, being this far south. I'm in Bristol, and being able to see them was peculiar, but I'm embodied, so I could go out, and I can go out and see sunsets and sunrises and such. Avoiding comparing yourself to others, because actually it's really unhelpful. You can kind of have this idea that other people are coping better than you, but you're not seeing them 24/7. You don't know whether they're crying into their pillow at 3 o'clock in the morning because you've not seen it and you don't know. So comparisons can be, and particularly where we're comparing ourselves to kind of very, very wealthy people who've got doctors on tap and all the rest of it, comparing yourself to them, if that's not your lived reality, is not, it's a meaningless comparison. If you are going to use social media, the idea is to use it to encourage others, but in an appropriate way. the rise and rise of "you've got this" is actually not helpful for some people. Learning to give compliments and learning, crucially, how to accept them. Practicing good self-care and whatever that might look like for you. And for some of us, that might mean starting to stop the self-harm first. Exercise if you can, but sometimes it's not a possible thing. Eating healthily, making sure you get enough rest. This social discourse we have about everyone's got to keep on going is not helpful. So making sure that you rest enough is part of actually having good body positivity. And I remember being told this at school, and also my grandmother's kind of really reinforcing this. I was told at school, kind of at teenage years, where girls kind of discover makeup, although I was quite late to that particular party. But I can remember our teacher saying, you know, makeup is lovely, but if you've only got 10 minutes before you get out of the house, the most important thing is focus on being nice to be near, because you can look amazing, but actually, if you don't smell nice, then no one's going to hang around to see if you have scintillating conversation or not, because they won't be able to get past the smell. So focusing on being nice to be near is really important. A while ago now, I was working on a mindfulness project in an area of social deprivation in Bristol. And one of the sessions was on using our senses, because mindfulness is about using your senses and kind of being embodied, at least that's part of it. And one of the things we were looking at was your sense of smell. And we ended up doing this thing called a hug in a bottle, which is where people found a scent that they would wear for themselves that made it feel like they were being hugged, or they were hugging themselves. So they were wearing it because it made them feel better. And sometimes for some people, that's a way in, is finding something that does that for them. The other way that I understood this from my grandmother's, this focus on being nice to be near, was also about kindness, being kind to yourself and kind to other people. It's really, I have had the pleasure, if you can call it that, of working with some extraordinarily good looking people. But if they are not at ease with themselves, they are just as difficult to be around as anyone else. It's always easier to be around someone who is comfortable in their own skin, even though for some of us that can take quite a lot of work to kind of get to that point. So being kind to ourselves, being willing to listen to ourselves and treating ourselves with respect, and then doing that for other people. That's all part of being nice to be near. The other thing my grandmother's told me was, life is not a competition. Who knew? And nor is it a beauty contest, which is kind of important thing for a teenage girl, especially a specky ginger teenage girl, because that's, yeah, it's never going to go well. And this is something that I absolutely love. It's the poem by Emily Dickinson, because when we're feeling really vulnerable and we're at our worst and our relationship with ourselves is at its poorest, this is a way of kind of, it can be a very simple way in, particularly with relationships. So Emily Dickinson's poem says, "They might not need me, but they might. I'll let my head be just in sight. A smile as small as mine might be precisely their necessity." So it's that idea that something, you can offer someone a smile and that actually might be what they need. And this is my poetry pharmacy book by William Seagate. And what he says about this poem is, when we close ourselves off, we generally do so out of a fear of being seen. Perhaps because to be seen and understood is something that we need so badly, it scares us. We would rather be safe and alone than face the terror of getting what we want. The danger of this is that we become so focused on our own fear, our own frustrated longings, that we forget other people have insecurities too. We forget that they could well be yearning for our company, for our wit and our insight, just as we are for theirs, but might simply be too afraid to ask. Being open to other people does not have to be something selfish. It can be a gift that we offer to someone else who is in just as much need as us. It can be hard to overstate the value of a small smile in the right situation, May not seem like very much, but it can be absolutely transformative. It's an offer of friendship, a gesture of solidarity, the first small step towards letting someone get close to you. And if this small thing is of such value, imagine the lives you could change if you gave the right people just a glimpse of your heart. Who knows, it might be precisely what both of you need in that moment. So, for those with hidden disabilities, support and understanding is often lacking, even among healthcare professionals. And so, where does that leave you? So, supported self-help, the Pituitary Foundation has a whole series of wellbeing booklets that look at different aspects of what it's like to have a pituitary condition. So booklet 1 looks at diagnosis and treatment in the immediate short term. Booklet 2, which I don't think we've got on here, is your journey, and it's looking at longer term impact of what it's like to live with a pituitary condition over the longer term. Booklet 3 looks at relationships and communication with yourself and with other people. So it's got a large section at the front, which is all about self-esteem, for instance. So it looks at that sense of who are you and relationships with others. So that circle I showed you with you in the middle and all those people around you, we did some research, and that booklet documents the various issues that came up for pituitary patients, talking to each of those or having to come into contact with each of those individuals. And the book talks about different ways in which you can cope with the difficulties that those things throw up. And in terms of functionality, which doesn't seem like the right word for it, but in relation to some of the difficulties that there can also be around intimacy, there's the infertility booklet, and obviously the two about diagnosis and journey also will cover some of that. There are some other sources of support though. So as Lottie was saying at the beginning, the Pituitary Foundation's got helpline, it's got telephone buddies, and it's starting its new counselling service very shortly. For people who are having difficulties in relationships, Relate has a counselling service which is about better relationships. For people who are kind of more concerned about visible difference aspect and wanting support with that, there are two things. There's Changing Faces UK, which provides support and promote respect for everyone with visible difference. And they've got a whole range of different things, and that's their website detail there. And then there's a programme that my colleague Alison Norman has produced, and it's called Face It at Home Together. It's an online support for people with visible difference. There are 8 sessions. You can do any of them in any order, and you could take as long as you like over it. You can contact Alison directly, or that you can watch the YouTube link and where she's talking about the programme in more detail. And if you're interested and want to do more around this, then on June the 10th at 5 o'clock, there's a free Face It group where you can log on, and Ali will be there talking about the Face It programme. So you can register. If you click on that link, you can register your interest in that programme.